welcome you to our Philanthropy Speaks Third Tuesday virtual roundtable discussion for nonprofit leaders. That's a mouthful this morning. This is brought to you by the Southern Illinois Community Foundation. I am Russell Williams, and I'm the Director of Community Impact Learning and Leading with Southern Illinois Community Foundation. We're happy that everyone's joined us today. We do come by virtual now on every third Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we're happy that you joined us today and that you'll enjoy this presentation and conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusiveness for nonprofit organizations. Next month, I want to mention that our roundtable discussion is going to be on August 18th. And that will continue our virtual conversation, the discussion. The topic is going to be about how nonprofit organizations reevaluate and pivot during challenging times. So that will be most appropriate in our conversation. Our presenters for that program is going to be Michelle Snyder, Kevin Hunsberger, and Tom Harness. And they are with the Southern Illinois Wellness Organization. And they're going to be able to present and continue our discussion on August 18th. And so today, our presenter is Raychel Yokem. She is the founder of Corporate Kin and also the manager of Diversity, Inclusion, and Affirmative Action with the Growth Mark Corporation. So Raychel, we welcome you. So glad that you could join us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you for reaching out to me. I'm excited to be here with all of you guys. So give me some grace today. I am in Springfield, Illinois. I'm not sure where all of you guys are, but we just had a nice little thunderstorm, so my Wi-Fi is just loving me right now. So I may freeze, and give me a second, and I'll move some things around, and I'll get back in here. So don't worry, just give me some grace and be patient, and we'll get through it. So I am going to go ahead and bring up my screen here so that way I can share my presentation and we'll get started. So you guys let me know if you have any issues saying anything along the way. Here we go. All right, we good? Byram, you can see?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what I want to do today is really just kind of walk through the presentation, but I hope that you'll feel free to stop me along the way. But I do want to open it up for some questions at the end and really just talk about what all of you are seeing in your communities. It really helps me to be able just to offer some advice, really think about ways that I can even further my learning and understand the strategies and struggles of diversity, especially in the boardroom and dealing with nonprofits and small businesses. So I'm hoping that we can have a really just in-depth conversation today and a really safe and trustful conversation about some of the struggles we're dealing around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as you just heard, my name is Raychel Yokem. I did found my own company called Corporate Kin. Starting last year, I really found that there was a need, especially for small businesses and nonprofits, to have some support when it came to diversity, equity, and inclusion, understanding how to do annual diversity audits, how to look at their policies and procedures and understand where they're maybe serving the majority and not the minority of their employees. I also do some diversity training as well, but really try to think about strategic work and ways to get long-term success when it comes to diversity in an organization. So I do a lot of that really just throughout the week, evenings, weekends, but full-time I work for an agriculture and energy company called Growmark out of Bloomington, Illinois. And they are a company that has just because of the industry that they're in, not seen a lot of diversity. So it's been a great challenge for me. And they have been very open-minded and accepting. And I started with them in December of this last year and came on as a consultant and became full-time and has gone really from there. So excited to just kind of take you through that journey. Some of the things I want us to think about today when we think about race in the workplace, because I think when we talk about diversity, there's a lot of things that we could discuss. We could be talking about diversity of perspective, diversity of experience, how you were raised, but it really is important to also talk about racial diversity. So when you see these words, a lot of times these do not come up when we're talking about racial diversity. They're coming up now as we've been looking at everything that's been happening in the world, but really mindset, empathy, feelings, compassion, that is a huge piece of being able to have racial diversity, being able to be vulnerable, right? those folks that say, I don't want to say anything, I might say the wrong thing. So there's this idea that you really are going to have to be vulnerable. You're going to have to let down some layers. And that's a really difficult part of this journey. So I bring this up very early on because as we go through this, this is a part that you're going to have to be willing to do. And if you're not here yet, this is really where you need to start. How can I be more compassionate and empathetic to folks that are different from me? How can I be more vulnerable in how I show up and the questions that I ask? How can I shift my mindset to the things that maybe my grandfather and grandmother taught me to say, maybe I don't agree with those thoughts and I'm going to start to shift my mindset and it's going to be a little bit different. That is a big ask. It's an ask that you're going to ask of your teams, of your boards, and not everyone is ready for that. So I just ask that you be sensitive and know that this is going to be part of the journey as well. So sometimes when people ask me, can I come in and do diversity training? I have to ask the question of, do we need to do mindset training first, right? And so sometimes we need to do mindset training before we can do diversity training. So I hope that that makes sense, and that is something that you'll all consider, that maybe that conversation needs to happen first before you jump right into diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to ask from all of you, when we look at these pictures that are on the screen, I want you to give me one word that comes to mind, anything you want. You can type it in the chat box, you can unmute, give me one word. Make sure if you type in the chat box, type to everyone so that I can see it. One word that comes to mind when you look at these photos, anything. Deaf, okay. What else? Voices, okay. Sad, yeah. Anything else? What comes to mind when you look at these pictures? Reaction, good. Inequality, good. I actually really enjoy seeing what you guys come up with. Whenever I ask this question, I do think we all have a bit of perspective, right, to when we see this, right? And sometimes it's frustration. Sometimes it's still, right? We're still talking about this. Sometimes people see this and they think family, right? When I see these photos, that was immediately what came to my mind. While yes, there's sadness and there's some anger, I also look at those photos and I see people that look like my family. And so something happens to me emotionally when I am looking at media content and images of people that look like my blood relatives. And I understand that that means that it's going to be a little bit different for me than it is going to be for you. Because for some of you, you might look at them and say, yeah, my family looks like that too. Or maybe some of our family that's been married and looks like that too. But these folks look like people that are my cousins, that are my brothers and uncles and fathers and mothers and children. And so that brings out a different type of emotion when I see it in the media. And so why is that important to understand how we all look at this and see something a little different? Well, it's important because when you're thinking about how folks are showing up to work every day, how they're showing up to volunteer, how they're showing up, maybe they're receiving services from you, however they're showing up, these things are impacting how they're showing up, right? So for someone who maybe can't relate to this, there may be no impact, right? They may just be, I'm frustrated because this is all I see on the news. I don't want to see it anymore. I want to see something else. But then there's those folks that are saying, I feel like I'm seeing people that I'm related to losing their life on video, and I'm hurting, and I'm feeling some really difficult pain. And so it's important to know that, because you might have to address it, right? As a leader, you might have to address that. And so a lot of workplaces were saying, well, where does this fit in? Where do I fit in with the Black Lives Matter movement or what's happening in the world today? Well, the reality is you fit in because your employees are experiencing something, no matter what side of the argument they're on, no matter how it's impacting them, they're feeling something. And to just kind of leave that elephant in the room and just act like they're not feeling it is not productive for business. So you're not going to be able to fully be effective without addressing what's happening. So I'm happy that we can all look at these photos and say what emotion we have, right? Because for some, it's deeper than others, and that's okay. I think, again, when we go back to those words, though, this is where we need to think about, even if you can't relate, can you still have empathy? Can you still have compassion for what's happening around us, right? You can disagree on why it's happening, how it should be fixed, who should decide how it should be fixed, who should lead the effort. You can disagree on all of that. But can you at least have empathy and compassion for what is happening on both sides, to our police officers, to our communities, to those who are in poverty? Can we have compassion for that? So it's important that we talk about the boardroom, and I really spend a lot of time and effort there, because whether it's a nonprofit boardroom or a corporate space, we need folks that are making decisions about the organization to be reflective of the communities and clients that they serve. And so when we look at board sources information, we see that that is still not the case, right? So even from a gender, from a racial perspective, we are not seeing the type of diversity that we need to see on our boards, especially our nonprofit boards. And this is an issue, because I will tell you, so for those of you who work in nonprofit, or maybe you're just somebody who spends a lot of time volunteering on the weekend, if you constantly see brown and Black people in a situation where they need help, your mind is going to start to tell yourself that Black and brown people need help all the time. You're going to have to tell yourself that that's not the truth. You're going to have to really do some work to really help change the narrative. This is important because even for myself, if you're going into an environment, and I go into an environment where I see Black and brown people that are successful and thriving, I'm in Black sororities, I'm in groups that are predominantly Black and brown people that are successful. And so my mindset is that that is what the majority of brown and Black people are. But there are, of course, in every community, folks in poverty. But when you're spending most of your time there, I didn't know if you knew we could hear you. That's okay. That's all right. So I just want to make sure that we are aware of the environments that we're in and how that impacts what our narrative is, what we're telling ourselves. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the fact that if you only go to communities that need help, and that is where you're seeing majority of that racial group, could you be creating a mindset that those folks are just folks that need help, right? And so that is going to be something I'm going to challenge you to change, and challenge you to put yourself in environments where that is not the only thing that you see, right? And so the same goes the other way, right? There are Black and brown people that always see white Americans in positions of power, CEO, leading boards, as their boss, as their manager, right? And they don't actually see those other communities that are struggling, that are also in poverty. So there's a mindset that there's no white people that are poor. And we all know that that's not true, right? We know that there's plenty of areas where that exists. So I just challenge all of us to not close our minds. Again, it's mindset. Close our minds to only what we see. It's important that we try our best to go out and see more than just our neighborhood, see more than just the groups that we're in, because we really do need to understand that every community has experiences and they all look different. And so my experience is not the entire Black experience, and we know that, right? So you have to talk to more than just me to get the Black experience. And I would have to talk to more than just you to get the female or male or white experience. And that just is the truth. So when we look at these board numbers, we decided that we wanted to create a building board diversity initiative. So I partnered with United Way and Forefront because they were already working on this initiative, and they said, will you come in, will you help us? And I said, absolutely. And we got together and we said, what can we do? We need to make a change in Sangamon County about the way that our boards look. We need to see something different. When we look at organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters, who their wait list of children a lot of times are African American children in our communities, but we had no African American staff members. We had no African Americans on our board. How can we make sure that their voices are being heard, right? So we are working on currently creating a couple of statements where we are going to ask the community to kind of make a commitment. So there's a couple articles there that you can take a look at as we've kind of started this journey and moved this journey along. But what we're going to be asking the community to do is make an employer commitment statement, where we are going to ask employers to say, I make the commitment to send my employees that are performing and doing well out to go serve on nonprofit boards, which means if they need to take 2 hours a month to go to a meeting or possibly to some type of event, they need to leave 30 minutes early, that I make the commitment that that is okay, because we need to serve our community. We need to have that perspective. And that employers will put in their actual employee policy statements that say, we support this. We want our employees to go out and be involved in the nonprofit community. We're also asking our nonprofits to make a commitment. So that commitment from nonprofits is going to be that they are going to do some diversity audits. They're going to check in and see where they don't have perspective. If they have an entire female board, they need to be looking for a male board member. And do they understand how to welcome that male board member and retain that male board member? So are they going to do some diversity training and training to really equip themselves to be successful? So those commitment statements are currently being written. We're hoping to launch those here in September to start in Sangamon County and then eventually be a statewide effort where we are asking employers and nonprofits to truly commit themselves to being intentional with diversity. And then the last is the community engagement piece. So we're trying to get the community to really get involved, go on our United Way website where we will have board opportunities there, and we will acknowledge those nonprofits that have made this commitment to board diversity and in hopes that folks will go out and show their interest to join nonprofit boards. So we're excited about this launch coming in September. We again want to expand this out to the entire state of Illinois. We're hoping to work with the governor on getting state employees as a part of this commitment as well on the employer side, because we know there's folks that want to be involved but just aren't able to get the time away from work. And we know that has become a barrier as we've talked to some nonprofits and interested candidates. So this Building Board Diversity Task Force that started with Forefront provided a number of trainings and still does to a lot of nonprofit organizations. Things that everyone can consider are unconscious bias, microaggressions. There was an anti-racism training. Board Source does a number of trainings. I think those trainings are really helpful. Definitely something that every organization can look into if they're looking for that really foundational diversity training. But again, I would ask that you focus and make sure that the mindset is there. We also worked with the diversity office at UIS. We contacted all the local Black fraternities and sororities and really got their input on, tell me why you aren't serving on a nonprofit board. Tell me if you have in the past, what's been your hesitation? What's been your experience? What's holding you back from doing it again? And then we pulled in representatives from a ton of organizations, a lot of nonprofits to say, what's your need? What are you looking for? Who are you hoping to find? Help us understand what that board process looks like. And so that allowed us to see a number of, I guess I'm going to say, really important details that we had to think about as we went through and thought, what's getting in the way of board diversity? So that's really what I want to talk to you guys now about, because I think this is important. When we think about diversity, a big piece of this is going to be inclusion and retention. And what we found is that a lot of boards actually did have diversity at one point in time, or maybe they just had one representative that came in. Maybe it was just an advisory member, but they were struggling to keep them. So this is a big part, because you don't want to do all of that work and then not be able to keep the person that you found. So there's this process, right, where you're actively working to improve diversity and inclusion, I think most people kind of stay in the middle there, where they're doing the training, they're doing what they need to do, they're having the conversations, they're going out, encouraging people to get involved. But there's this part of the process where someone might have a bad experience. And so keep in mind this bad experience is usually because the organization is not culturally competent, okay? So when an organization is not culturally competent, there's a lot of things that can happen. Usually it's going to be in microaggressions, and it's going to be an implicit bias. So it's not going to just be out there. You'll find that they may accidentally not invite them to events. They may not ask their input during meetings. They may not respond to their emails. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can unintentionally but leave someone out. And that creates an impression. So you have to be very careful about this. And so how do you do this, right, without your, maybe I'm going to call them your token, right? Because some people say, I don't want to have a token, and I don't want them to feel like a token. But let's say you have one Hispanic board member and you don't want to make them feel already more excluded. But how you have to get to know them. How are you going to get to know them, make them feel welcome? And so maybe you do have to create board events where everyone's getting to know everyone. Maybe there's a time where you're doing icebreakers. You're being a little bit more social than you normally were, because you're trying to create a space where this new board member can come in and feel welcomed. This is important because you do want to create this great experience, this culturally competent experience where your board and your team or leader, whoever it is, feels empowered to share experiences, feels empowered to give insight and innovation, because the whole point of having a diverse board is so that you can be at your full potential. But if someone comes onto your board and feels like they're not truly going to be heard, they're not going to share or give any good information, ideas, ways to fundraise, right? And that is what you're looking for. So there's this play, right, of I'm trying to work on being a diverse board, but I keep going back and forth between, am I creating a bad experience, or am I creating a great experience, or am I just still working at it? I think most of us are just still working at it, but I want you to be aware of this. And if you're truly not ready to bring someone into your board or even into your organization, that I would encourage you not to do it until you're ready, because you could get the bad experience, and that could really change the perspective, and really could almost impact your reputation and getting future board members and future involvement. So I would just be a little bit cautious for that. So let's talk about, where do you begin? All right, so I think this is good. I think this is from an individual level, also from an organizational level. Where do you begin? I want to make sure we don't have any chat questions. Okay, so Mike says, what tips do you have for helping smaller new organizations recruit diverse members in rural areas? Okay, Mike, that's a very packed question, and we're going to talk about it, because I think that is difficult, and we are going to talk about that. And I think when a lot of folks come onto these calls, right, that's the answer they want. And I'm going to give you some ideas. I don't know that you're going to love all of them, but we're going to talk through them, and we'll see what we get. So you hang on to that, Mike, and we'll talk about it. So let's talk about where to start. So again, when we talk about mindset, I really think it starts with just an education and awareness, right? And again, it's not about everybody agreeing or being on the same page. So I think for individuals, I always recommend go out and read the books, the podcast, and the events that you can attend. There's so much information out there now, right? All you got to do is hit Google, and Google will give you all of these things that you can read, listen to. All of those things will help with your awareness and education. It's a great place to start. But when I even think about mindset, I put movies and television on here, because if you have not gone and watched a movie that has an entire cast of a different culture, I would encourage you to go and do that. Like, I watched Crazy Rich Asians. It's one of my favorite movies now. But I just encourage you to go and watch a movie with an entire cast that's of a different culture. And you'll see, I mean, they're great movies, they're just not, they're not what you see all of the time. And I think it's good, again, right? That exposure, seeing something different, just seeing what their movies are like. They're typically the producer is of that culture, that background as well. Watching Tyler Perry movies, whatever it may be, go and experience that. I think all of that helps with shifting mindset. One of my favorite TV shows is Blackish, and I always encourage people, go watch Blackish. It's just really funny, and they talk about a lot of issues in the Black community that I think anyone can relate to, and they make a little bit of humor out of it, but it really is enjoyable. And right, so that cast is a majority Black cast when you watch that TV show. So I think starting there, making sure that you are doing that, making sure that your group is just having that awareness, maybe doing a book club, doing some type of having a speaker come in, something very foundational, right? Then I think you move into your community and cultural competency. This is where you're going to really dig in a little bit more. And I always like to talk about from the individual perspective, because I think we all have to do the work too, right? We can't just rely on our teams to do the work. We have to do the work. And that starts in family conversations. So that conversations with your children, conversations with your spouse, with your neighbors, keeping that conversation alive and saying, what do you think about what's happening? What do you think we could do? Are we doing anything to perpetuate this? Do you think our neighborhood is welcoming, right? Do we know 10 of our neighbors? Do we know their children's names? Do we know anything special about those folks? All of that is important, again, to the narrative, changing the narrative of what you see. This is where you can also get into volunteerism and book clubs and experiences. I talk a lot about experiences because I think even when you go on vacation, is it worth stopping maybe somewhere for an hour and going to a local African American history museum with your family and your kids? Why not, right? So getting some of those experiences in as well, right? Telling some of that history and that story, again, just helps shape the experience. So even when you're planning an event for your company and you're thinking of activities to do, right? Can you think of activities that can be more of an awareness, learning type of activity? So I always bring this up when I worked in the insurance industry. A lot of times we'd have all of these golf events. And even when I was on a nonprofit board, we had a golf fundraiser. And I golfed for the first time in my life in 2019. So I always laugh about that because they'd have these events and I'd be like, oh yeah, sounds fun. I'll try to raise some money for you. But I wouldn't go because I didn't golf. I don't know that I'd ever even stepped foot on a golf course. I maybe had for an event or a wedding or something, but other than that, I had not. And I'm a middle class African-American woman, but I had not. And so I think a lot of folks found it interesting when I finally said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to this golf event that you guys have been talking about for years. Where in the heck do I get clubs and clothes? And someone help me out. Right. And so I had to ask someone to help me out, and they did, and everybody was welcoming, and it was terrible. I did, 18 holes and my back hurt for 3 days. And I was like, why do you guys do this? Why do you think this is fun? But I did it. And I'm happy I did because I needed to see that side. But we had a really big learning moment in that. And the next year they said, do we really need to do golfing every year? Are we leaving out a group of folks by doing golfing? Right? Is there something else we can think of? And so for me, that was just a really big conversation because they were willing to say, you know what, maybe we're excluding people and we don't even realize it. We've been excluding you for years. And while you weren't really bothered by it, you still weren't present. And we wanted you to be present, right? And involved and interested. So I think that's really important and something to think about. What are you doing in your community and what type of folks are you attracting because of the things that you're doing? And then even with the volunteerism, again, not spending all of your time in these low economic communities where you're seeing a majority racial group, right? That is going to put you in the mindset of that is where those majority of those folks are. And that's not true, right? There's certain groups of low economic communities and every community is impacted by them. So every racial demographic is impacted by having low economic communities. So just making sure you're not creating a narrative for yourself. Then the last step is really action and justice. This is where we start getting into, I'm going to take my policies and systems that have been set in place in our company and I'm going to rip them to shreds. I'm going to say, I'm making changes. I'm going through and saying, okay, look at the hiring process. No, I want to make sure that we have more than one person in every interview so that we can have perspective. I want to make sure that we at least have 3 candidates in every interview because I want to make sure that we're really giving our community a chance. I want to make sure that every job posting we put up, that we also make sure we share it with the NAACP and the Chamber of Commerce, and every posting that goes out, I want to make sure that the community sees it. So there's some work then on the inside that's being done to say, we are going to make some systemic change to get long-term change, right? We're going to break down some of the things that just seem easy for us to do, right? It's so easy to call up my cousin and say, hey, we're looking for somebody. Can you send someone over? That's easy, but it doesn't give me the best candidate pool, right? It gives me more people that look like me and my cousin, right? So this is a big part of it. Education and awareness, community and cultural competence, and action and justice. All right, I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. Okay, we'll keep going because I do want to open it up at the end. I think we're doing okay on time. We're right about where I hope we'd be. So when we think about, is your board ready? Board readiness. This is really when we're thinking about, is your board ready to diversify, or are they diversified already, right? Is your staff diversified? Is it diversified already or ready to diversify? And a lot of times what I'm going to look at are these 4 components, right? Are you doing some type of annual diversity training? Could be mindset training, could be cultural competence, whatever, but are you doing some type of training that's focused on the individual? Do you have community partners? Do you have partners in your area that address different types of communities, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's Black and Brown community, whether it's persons with different abilities community? Do you have partners, well-established partners that you know someone over at that office that you talk to often, that you're engaging when you have opportunities? Looking at your board requirements. Have you thought about a potential advisory role that potentially doesn't have the same requirements as the rest of your board? Have you possibly adjusted your board requirements to be more realistic? There was even a group that questioned in their board requirements, should we take money from our board members, or is that letting them off scot-free, letting them write a check, right? Should I just allow my board members to write a check and then say, yeah, that's it, I'm not going to fundraise, I'm not going to call anyone, I'm not going to reach out to corporations and say, would you donate? I'm just going to write my check like I do every year and sit back and vote on whether or not we'll move forward with certain projects. Does that create problems? And are you missing out on potential funds by not having an engaging board that, instead of just writing a check for $5,000 or $10,000, goes out to a corporation and gets $50,000, right? Are you missing out on the potential to be even better because you're good letting your board members sit back and just do what they've done for the past 10 years? So some boards are saying, I'm setting term limits. I'm saying, you know, board members can donate, but they at least have to fundraise this much every year, right? It can't just be donation, which I think is difficult, right? Because you don't want to let go of those checks, but imagine the potential you could get if you really got an engaged board that was really going out there and fundraising. And then there's also this piece of doing some self-evaluation, some surveys, really determining what your gaps are. Doing a survey to say, do all of our board members live on the same side of town? Do all of our board members make over 6 figures? That might work, but then again, you're missing a perspective. You're missing a perspective. You're holding all of your events on one side of town, right? They're not worried about charging $100, $150 for a ticket because they make 6 figures, right? But maybe there's some really good fundraisers and folks that want to get involved with you, but you don't have that perspective because your board is missing those gaps. So doing some surveys to say, where do we possibly need to get a board member that can bring a different perspective? So I offer a number of consulting services. You guys can go to my website, Corporate Kin, and take a look. There's a lot of things. We kind of already talked about that. I love coming in and helping where I can. I want you guys to get connected with me, but I really want to spend some time now and talk. I want to talk about what you've been dealing with, what's been holding you back. I want to talk about the rural communities because I think this is a big space where a lot of questions come up. So I want to talk about that. So let me see if there's anything in the chat, or you guys can unmute. What questions do you have for me? I'm sharing here. And we can go right to Mike's question if you want to. We can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So Mike asked a lot about these smaller areas. So Mike, let's see. Are you still on here, Mike? I don't know if he is.
I think he's just muted.
Okay. All right. Well, I want Mike.
Yeah, I'm still on here. Sorry, I had to get the right button pushed.
You're good. You're good. So Mike, tell me a little bit about your community and where you're located.
Okay, so we are located in Franklin County, Illinois. We are a very small, very new organization. We're about 7 months old, and we've just started through the incorporation process. So we're really young and really at a good stage where we can go ahead and we want to include some things that give us a good, strong foundation, such as diversifying our board. Just to be frank with some things, we started out in Franklin County, which is predominantly white. So most of my board is a reflection of that right now. With some of the other counties, that brings in other demographics that we want to be able to represent in our organization. We work with people that are trapped in lifestyles of substance use and homelessness. So we want to make sure that our board adequately represents everybody in our area. But as a new organization, we have a very small network. Plus, we are an unknown organization, still growing and developing. So we are at the bottom of the pecking order when it comes to appeal, But it's something that we've targeted that we really want to do, and really looking for some ideas on how we can find some people and recruit some board members.
I love that, Mike. Yes, so you're right. I mean, you being early in the process means that you can put things in place that will have long-term impact. The one thing that immediately came to mind for me, which is what I love about Growmark, because working in agriculture, you can only imagine the lack of diversity that's there, right? Especially in the Midwest, right? There's lots of diversity in farming when you get into the South. But one of the things that they did a long time ago, way before I was there, some wonderful board members said, we are going to put in an at-large board seat. They actually put in 2. And this at-large board seat could be for whatever you wanted. And they ended up using 1 to expand over into Iowa. But we ended up using the 2nd to get our first female board member. And I don't think at the time when they created that position, they thought that's what it was going to be for. But in 2020, that's what it became. And so when I think about your community, I don't know, Mike, if you have any community colleges nearby, but if you have the potential to create an at-large board seat, there could be value in you going and getting a student to serve on your board as an at-large member or an advisory member, just to provide perspective on how to market yourself, how to brand yourself, how to get to a younger community. Especially the population you serve. I don't know maybe what age is being impacted the most, especially when you think about substance abuse, but maybe just giving you that age perspective as well. So maybe you could contact a local community college and specifically look for a woman or a minority to serve and give you perspective. And maybe they don't have to have the same requirements as the rest of your board member. It's strictly kind of an advisory role. And every year, or maybe even every semester, they could give you a new student, right? It could kind of be a part of a program, giving them real board experience and partnership with a school. So that's something I'm thinking about. The other thing that kind of came to mind is finding a couple of groups nearby. So whether it's like a Black chamber, whether it's a, Spanish speaking focused group, something like that, that's within, I'd say, no more than 60 miles, and just reaching out to them and creating a partnership with them and saying, how could we maybe work together? And maybe how could someone from your group possibly serve as a board member on our group, right? So I think if there's anyone nearby, so you might have to find some partners to help you, but that's what immediately comes to mind. And the reason that I say that, especially for rural populations, so for us in agriculture, we do partner a lot with local community college, manners groups, to find those minorities that have some interest in ag and energy. So I would maybe say start there. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of help, and I think those are some great ideas. We actually have Carbondale, Illinois, has SIU, and we actually have a board member that is a member of SIU Medicine. So I think that's a great
Yeah.
idea. I think I will approach them to hopefully open up a doorway, maybe with some student body. I think a student is an excellent idea because that would be a great opportunity for them as well as us. Thank you for your suggestion.
No
Yeah.
problem. Yeah, you're close to Carbondale. You'll get somebody who will get you guys on TikTok and Instagram and all the things you need to be on to get your name out there. So yeah, wonderful. So what else? I sent out a couple of questions. I know Russ sent that out to you guys. I want to ask the question, do you guys feel like your boards and organizations have really transparent conversations about diversity or the lack of diversity? Are you guys having those today?
Well, I think we're trying, but I don't think we're succeeding in the conversation. I think we're, even when you're just talking about diversity. So for a number of years, diversity meant, do we have male and female? Do we, and so we achieved that, think, oh, good, we have some diversity. And then we missed the picture on what diversity meant beyond that. And I really like what you're saying about the diversity of age, and going to get a college students to sit on a board. So years ago, I was on a Big Brother, Big Sister board in Ohio. We never once thought about the fact that a college student could have brought such a different perspective to what the rest of our board looked like. And our board was pretty diverse at that point, but it was not diverse in age. It was all of our board were sat kind of in one age group, mid-level business, in middle of the road there, and we didn't even think about the fact that we missed out on having some new and fresh perspective. And so I think that's a great thing to bring into this, not only the fact that we have to look at diversity as not being just one or two things. Diversity is a whole range of things that we've not looked at in the past.
Yeah, I love that, especially when I think about Big Brothers Big Sisters, because a lot of the children that end up on their list happen to be young Black men. And so that is something that I always brought up with them was you need to have that Black male perspective on your board, but also the young perspective, right? Who knows better than a young Black man what type of mentorship he might need, right? So having someone on the board who could say, hey, while that seems nice, right, to go bowling, this is maybe more of what this community of children, being someone that, grew up in that area, might want. And so it is, yeah, we want to have that perspective. So thank you for that, Byram. That's so key.
Raychel, that's a great topic, is to look at our activities, because we're very event driven with our nonprofits here in Southern Illinois. And so right now might be a great time, because we're not having events, to look at why we have those events and who are we reaching. And if the demographics don't match, as you said earlier about golfing, then we may want to, pivot and look at something else that might reach more of what we want to reach, the why. Yeah.
I think we're just so used, right, to doing what, everyone else does, the golf outings, the bowling events, whatever the case may be. But then I question and I say, what do you think you could raise if you did a TikTok dance party, right? And everyone's on TikTok right now. Parents are learning how to TikTok, kids are showing up. And what if you, for Big Brothers Big Sisters, you had your kids in a program come and be the teachers? What type of impact would that have on your donors, right? To see the actual children who are being served by the community kind of leading the event and being the event. I can only imagine. I think that more than just $100 ticket, I think that they would be writing checks and checks and checks to say, keep doing this, keep bringing these kids here smiling and dancing, or whatever the case may be, or doing it online, or making their own dances and teaching them to people online. We've got to think beyond what we normally do, right? It's thinking inside the box, outside of the box, kicking the box to the left, doing all of it, right? And you've got to get different minds to be able to do all of that. So if you're not having transparent conversations in your organization about where diversity is lacking, I would encourage you guys to start, right? Just saying, what do we think, right? How do we think we're doing? Do we think we have perspective? Do we think that we are doing the best we can be doing at branding and marketing ourselves? Are we having events? Are our events selling out? Do we have to keep looking for bigger venues for our events? If we don't, why not? What's holding us back, right? Do our board members really know how to fundraise? If they don't, who can we bring in to really make sure that we have a good, strong fundraising board and not just a board that's writing checks and making votes, right? So if you're not having those conversations, I encourage all of you guys on this call to be the person to push boundaries, stir up the pot, right? Yeah. Be the person.
Excellent.
There was another question on there that said, what is holding your board back from sourcing and finding these candidates? So does anyone have any perspective on maybe what's holding your board back from being able to move forward with this?
This is Tina. I'm the CEO for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Southern Illinois. And one of the things, and I think and we're actually at a space right now because we're getting ready to move into a different community in Marion. And actually Russell was just elected to our board last night. So congratulations, Russell. So he's going to help us make a big difference, I think. But one of the things that I feel are that our board has been so reliant. I've been with the organization 11 years, CEO 3. It's been so reliant on getting friends of friends and telling people we're a working board, but a working board could also mean a micromanaging board and not really doing the big work of telling the story, of getting out and cultivating new donors. And, you know, when you said the thing about the golf outing, I was like, oh, that is a perfect in for me to say, we're never doing this again. When I became CEO, I had all these people tell me I had to golf now. And I was like, what? No way. But really, it's about having the real conversation about what is it we need. I've taken my trainings from national and come in and say, let's do this survey. Let's diversify our board. And they can say, yes, we need to do that. But when you showed that chart, are they ready? I think we're getting there, but we are not ready because we have to have the conversation. And to me, it can't be just a surface conversation. We need more males. We need more African Americans. We can't just have that superficial conversation. It needs to go deeper. How do we get deeper? Besides just Tina, me yelling and pushing.
Yeah. Hey, keep stomping those feet, Tina. I love it. You make me so happy. One, because I'm a Boys and Girls Club kid, and I just know the power of that program. I know the power of being able to take ballet and not have to pay for it through that program. There's just so much about Boys and Girls Club that I love, right? So one, as I think about Boys and Girls Club, a really good friend of mine, Tiffany, is the CEO of the one.
Yes, I love Tiffany.
Oh, she's the best. She's the best. So even as I talk to her and I think about the Boys and Girls Club, I wonder, as you have your children come in there, have you ever met a parent that you've said, I wish this parent would serve on our board? And so the reason that I think about that is when you think about a parent, one, because they're bringing their child there, so they trust you, right? But they also have that perspective. They have a community perspective. They can connect to the story on why they need to bring you there, right? Why they need to bring their child there. And so maybe there is room for that parent to be on there. Maybe that parent's going to say, I don't have the type of money that I need to have to be a board member. And you say, you know what, though? You tell your story and you'd be surprised the amount of checks that you could help us get. So thinking about, is there a parent that comes in there that you guys always talk to and just know that they're really involved in the community that you want to start having conversations with about becoming a board member? I think that's a great place to start. And then I know that even when you think about your volunteers, I know my sorority, Zeta Phi Beta, Phi Beta Sigma, all the Black fraternities and sororities do a lot of volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club. And if you start seeing those volunteers coming in and you see someone, a Black male, who is really having an impact on those children, say, let's start having conversations about, the potential of you becoming a board member maybe in the next, year or two. And so I think that's a great place to start because they already feel the connection to the program. And you do want people who are connected to the program. So, I think that's a great place to start. But I do think you should challenge your board on that because out of all people, why not a parent? Why not a parent who sends their child to be in your program? Right?
Yep. No, that's really helpful. And so we do have a board member that her son, when he was much younger, was our youth of the year, and she's on, but she's not a very strong board member. I think it was great to bring her on, but I think I have some other parents in mind right now that I think might help her become stronger, because then they would have a connection together and they could actually work on some projects together. But and I loved, actually I've written 2 names down already just from you saying, a parent and a volunteer, someone that was a previous intern that volunteers through their fraternity. But I agree. I think those are really important, that community connection that can tell that story every day.
I love it. I will tell you, majority of the Black fraternities and sororities, when I asked them why they were not serving on a board, they said because no one has approached me about it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So approach them about it. Yes. I love it. I love it. No problem. I really think you're going to have some success with that. The other thing too that I always ask boards to consider is if you have not brought someone in the past 2 years to do a fundraising and event development training, find someone to come in and do one. Most people do not understand how to fundraise in 2020. It is not easy. I myself am still learning how to do it. So bring someone in to do a board training on that. And that could really help that board member who's struggling to just be a better board member. Forefront offers Board 101 training. We are hoping that the boards that take a diversity commitment with us, that they will have all of their board members go through Board 101 training. Because I think we bring on board members and we actually don't tell them what the responsibilities of being a board member are. Right. So they have no clue. So making sure that you're offering some type of Board 101. And I think we're going to record it and offer it online through Forefront so that we can start just sharing it. And as boards make the commitment, they will have all their board members take that online training. So I'll stay in touch with you guys on that. I promise.
Yeah. I think that's that would be an added value for us. Boys and Girls Clubs of America offers, we offer a board orientation, but BGCA also offers board trainings, like Board 101s, and they just finished a series. They're going to do another one soon. But one of the things that I have with our Resource Development Committee is that bringing Russell on will definitely be a big help. But I have someone from National that's going to be doing a training, because I was like, I left the last committee meeting going, oh my God, they just are not listening to me and they don't know how to do this. But, when your committee chair says, oh, we can't ask board members to go out and ask, I was like,
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
what are we supposed to be doing? Right.
So I agree. We need to bring people in to train. It's important to hear a different voice as well, saying the same thing that someone else is saying. But
Raychel, I think we have time for just one more question or comment, or if you have one more point you want to interject before we break off.
Yeah, I'll just leave it out there. If there's anything that I can help you with before we go today, speak now. If not, contact me via email and I will try my best to help you. I am pretty booked up on doing diversity trainings until about late August, but if you want me to come and do something virtually or come in person, let me know and we can try to work it out. You can just contact me on my website. Again, it's corporatekin.com, or you can email me corporatekinrachel@gmail.com. So any questions?
As we look towards the future and training opportunities to empower our nonprofits in this region, we'd like to, tap into your strengths and ask you, whether it's online, and we're looking at next year of having some face-to-face, invite you back to this area and do a face-to-face training. So
Love that.
want to give everybody a chance. If you have one more comment or one more question you wanted to get in on this conversation today. And I just want to thank everybody who joined us. Thank you, Raychel, for joining us today. Loved your expertise, your perspective, and your experience on this subject, and very well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who could join us today for this virtual roundtable. As I said earlier, join us again. It's the third Tuesday of each month at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So next month is August 18th, and we hope that you will join us again. But God bless, and you guys have a great week. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.